Al Pacino, just another old playboy. At least, that's what all the tabloids claimed. 83-year-old actor and his young lover. He hasn't changed, new girlfriend, new scandal. What is she after? Money or fame? Hollywood was used to stories like this. Another aging star refusing to accept old age, another young beauty enjoying the gifts and lavish vacations. The narrative was so predictable it barely needed an explanation. But this time, something felt off. She wasn't a famous model or actress. She didn't attend red carpet events. She didn't flood Instagram with photos of them together. She didn't give interviews. So who is she? Reporters started digging deeper. Her name was Sophia. She was nearly 40 years younger than him. An art historian. Lived in Boston, not Los Angeles. Had never appeared in the press before. What is she doing with Al Pacino? People wondered. But the bigger question was, what was he doing with her? Al Pacino had always avoided serious relationships. He used to joke that his one true love was cinema. And yet, here he was, at the twilight of his life, suddenly caught up in romance again. It seemed suspicious. Just another aging actor afraid of getting old, social media sneered. He stayed silent. And the more silent he remained, the angrier people got. Because no one knew the truth. And no one even guessed that this wasn't a love scandal at all. This was a story about redemption. At the far edge of New York, where the dim glow of old streetlights barely cut through the darkness, there was a tiny cafe that had never made it onto a tourist map. It hadn't changed in 50 years, the same wooden tables, the same faded photographs on the walls, the same lingering scent of coffee and pastry, as if time had stood still inside its walls. A long time ago, a young Alfredo Pacino used to sit there. Back then, he wasn't a legend. He was just a kid from the Bronx, dreaming of the stage, broke, constantly doubting whether he should even keep trying. But he wasn't alone. Her name was Lillian. She wasn't just beautiful, she was the one who saw something in him beyond just another poor kid hanging around theater basements, hoping for a break. She was his first audience, his critic, his muse. You were born for greatness, Al, she would say, holding his hand. But it's going to take sacrifices. He looked at her for a long time. What if I don't want to sacrifice you? Lillian only smiled. Don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. She lied. When Al landed his first big role, everything changed. Hollywood swallowed him whole. Every day became a fight to stay on top. They saw each other less and less. First, it was days apart. Then weeks. Then months. I understand, Al, she told him over the phone, when he once again couldn't make it back to her. But he knew that wasn't true. He knew she was waiting. He knew that every day without him was breaking her heart. But he also knew he had no choice. He had dreamed of this his entire life. He had fought too hard, climbed too high. Now that he had finally made it, he couldn't turn back. One day, she stopped answering his calls. By the time Al Pacino became famous, he found out that Lillian had married someone else. He hadn't seen her in over 50 years. Didn't know what kind of life she had. Didn't know if she had been happy. And then, at 83 years old, he heard her name again. From Sophia. He had met her backstage after an event, completely by chance. She was my mother, she said simply. And just like that, everything turned upside down. Al Pacino stared at Sophia for a long time. He couldn't believe it. The woman everyone thought was just another young fling was, in reality, the daughter of the only person he had ever truly loved. Lillian, his voice faltered. She passed away 2 years ago, Sophia said. He closed his eyes. I didn't know. I know. She didn't know anything about you either. Al leaned back in his chair. It felt like he was slipping into another life, a place where time had no meaning. Was she happy? Sophia nodded. Very. She never had regrets. And you? She hesitated for a moment. I always knew who you were. She never hid it from me. He flinched. But I wasn't there. You didn't need to be. Al met her gaze and, in an instant, saw Lillian in her eyes. Why did you come to me? She smiled. I didn't come to you. I just waited until you finally realized that running from the past is pointless. He laughed. Oh, Lillian, she would have said that too. She did. Sophia didn't want his money. She didn't want his fame. She asked for nothing. But Al knew he owed something. Not to her. To Lillian. He could never give her back what she had lost. But he could finally do what he should have done 50 years ago. And, most importantly, he didn't hide. Journalists saw them together everywhere. At the movies, at cafes, walking along the waterfront. And the whole time, they talked. About Lillian, young and carefree. About him, ambitious and romantic. About the future they had once dreamed of, and the life that had unfolded instead. About how he had loved her, how he had lost her, how he had regretted it all. For the first time in years, he spoke about Lillian. No, not quite right. For the first time in years, he spoke to Lillian. Her way of talking, her dry sense of humor, the way she reacted to a good cup of coffee. Sophia had brought it all back to him. And he watched her like the greatest film he had ever seen. A film called Déjà Vu. He was a man who had finally stopped running. The past no longer haunted him. He had simply let himself dissolve into it.